I've been thinking a lot about nature recently, partly because Hegel's basic idea is that nature is sort of reality's attempt to install some functional, orientable point of what we might call material reality. But it's a total paradox. I mean, how can nature exist if the underlying reality of nature is trying to use nature as an image, as a structure, as a fantasy to prove that it exists? Which you might think assumes the standpoint of against some agent called reality, but that's kind of just a paradox again. Reality doesn't really exist, and Hegel would probably say that we actually go through kind of the mystery of nature itself in order to see something we want to call reality, the kind of engine room of nature or materiality, phenomena. Interestingly enough, I mean, really nature is countered by the crude kind of raw power of materiality itself, which is just kind of pure, almost aimless contingency. But when you're trying to set down some kind of rational design for materiality, or what would have been in an earlier time than Hegel's some metaphysical design, it's sort of hard to say, to give any description, even one which says, well, it's random and anarchic and contingent, because of course, and this would have been Hegel's point, it's still a determination. How do you completely free yourself from all the presuppositions? And Hegel's answer was quite strange, and it's something that Zizek talks about at length. But it's basically like, imagine you're in a house that doesn't work in its interior how it looks like it must work from its exterior. Once you go in, it doesn't have the normal dimensions or spatiality or linearity that you expect it to. And in fact, what Hegel was particularly interested in, whether it was the developments of nature or the developments of history, so these kind of phenomena that gave us the sense that there was some deeper structure at work. He was interested in the fact that all of this sense of progress, all of the sense of linearity that was almost superimposed upon the raw power of materiality was retroactive, it was retrospective, it was kind of constituted after the fact. People, raw material agents, whatever that might be, sort of had the freedom to disturb and disorient material far enough until it kind of intersects with itself. Sort of question the incompleteness of raw material reality until it would yield some kind of form. And that all of the closing of the circle, all of the linearity of reality emerged only because there was a gap in material reality that was never closed up, and therefore the need for narrativization and interpretation, symbolic interpretation, so again what we call structure and fantasy and progress and linearity, well, since the gap never closed, those things were always, in a totally provisional sense, necessary. And you could temporarily close the gap, at least in fantasy, after the fact, at least until some other random event or purge reintroduced the raw, unflinching power of material reality, or again, worse yet, the raw, unflinching power of the gap inside material reality. Because material reality is the house, right? It's the thing that when you actually get up close to it, it doesn't work. It doesn't really have any rules. And again, the temptation that has to be avoided is to say, okay, so it isn't bound by rules. It's free-flowing. This only makes the house seem kind of uncanny and sort of diseased. It's not a space of free play and spontaneous interaction. It's a sort of defiantly dysfunctional pathology. I mean, it's productive, but only in the most sort of disturbing way. And of course, Hegel's achievement is to give us some basis in which to understand linearity, progress, the acts of closing the circle, which work as long as they are in the past, as long as they are retrospective, symbolic, and therefore fantastical. And that fantasy, those structures do retroactively, right, give form, shape, structure to material reality. But he manages to defend the existence of these things, but in the most disturbing way. They're also riven through with pathology because they can never fully explain and or reduce the raw pathology, of the purge of material reality. And yet also material reality can't just be lived with, right? There is no nature, right? That's the point. Nature is also just a nice circle, and Hegel was very interested in how this circle nonetheless did continuously, and again almost as if it was an affliction that reality had contracted, or the human being, or materiality itself. I mean, it kept coming back and reinscribing its own order, an order that was totally ideological, right? I mean, this is the through line from Hegel to Lacan to Zizek, and critiquing not just cultural and political ideology, but ideology itself that is written into reality. Reality can't avoid ideologizing. And in fact, there were other German idealists around Hegel who wrote books dedicated to this subject, dedicated to the story, the history that reality has to tell itself. And this was an amazing turn in philosophy because it portrayed all metaphysics that had been done up until that point as if it was an enormous amount of ideology that needed to be critiqued. And yet, of course, it only asserts the mystery of ideology all the more forcefully. And of course, it doesn't explain reality at all, whether reality is real. I mean, a totally overdetermined question already, But I suppose the thing to try and imagine is what would it be like to be exposed to sort of the absolute at its rawest. There's a scene and a conceit in Murakami's Dance, 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 where this man goes to the 12th floor or something of a hotel, and it opens and it's totally pitch black and smells sort of musky, and it's a totally uncanny image, but it has that sort of accidental function again of the house or the hotel that looks normal from the outside and is totally disturbed from the inside. In a disproportionate way, though, right? In an unintegratable way, right? That kind of sense of the gap. And that's sort of a kind of literary image of what it would mean to be sort of rawly exposed to not just reality or materiality, but like the gap itself, the sort of pure unfinishedness of things.